So let's look at those stories in a bit more detail. How is the media discussing some of these key issues? So we have got Facebook, of course, everywhere. This is the New York Times, which looks at the announcement from the company, the fake profiles that they say have appeared and the influence they may have brought on ahead of those mid-term elections. In the UK, The Independent covers Liberal Democrats leader Vince Cable, saying his campaign for a second Brexit referendum has now gained an unstoppable momentum. Time magazine's website has the latest on the 3D printed guns controversy in the United States, talking about the federal judge blocking the planned release of software to make them. Now, sick days, apparently, among Brits is falling to an all-time low. So The Sun is asking the question, should workers not battle to go to the office when actually they are unwell? And then finally, The Telegraph is among many picking up on Madonna's latest appearance. She is the cover star of Vogue, which is out today, and it talks about her reinvention at the age of 60. Well, Oliver Cornock is back, editor-in-chief of Oxford Business Group. Oliver, let's get stuck in. So what is the New York Times saying about Facebook's announcement of these fake accounts?
Well, it's simply saying that these accounts have been identified, they've been closed, but of course this is against the background of the current trial with Manafort going on in the US. This continual undercurrent of Russian influence in the election. This comes around the midterm story, and this is about these so-called bad actors on social media. And part of me sort of wonders how much of a big story is this, because it's a relatively small number of accounts. At the same time, foreign influence in other countries' elections is all very controversial. It just seems to me to be a little bit of a non-story on one level, because it simply fuels a narrative that's already ongoing. At the same time, a real break for Facebook actually tackling this seemingly in quite a constructive and proactive manner.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's pro-action on the part of Facebook as opposed to joking about it and sweeping it to one side, which the boss did initially. But the question is, you say it's a small number of accounts. They say that, something like 450,000 people could have been exposed to them or what have you. It is a small issue, but how worried are you about this issue of disinformation in the run-up to key democratic events around the world? Well,
it does play to this fake news narrative, ironically, of Donald Trump's, because, of course, he's somebody who's argued against the fake news, but this is something that feels it could have been skewed to favour him. It's a bit controversial. Step back. It is about the pace of development of Facebook and other social media platforms and how they embrace these bad actors, the bad people who are going to use these. And they're always going to be changing the platforms that they use. These people, such as Facebook and Twitter, need to be ahead of the game. Is the technology, is the governance moving as fast as it should be?
Do you use Facebook?
Absolutely, I do.
And what do you use it for?
I use it purely for social stuff.
Just for connecting with people? So in terms of news, it's not a source for you?
I don't personally use it for news, although, of course, a lot of people do. Twitter is
Apparently,
my
a lot of younger people do.
Yeah, I think I'm obviously on the older side of this.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Well, let's have a look at what viewers have been saying, because we were asking you earlier, what are you using Facebook for? If you're using Facebook, obviously on our website, you can see some of the adverts, some of the propaganda that people have said is on Facebook. So many of you have been in touch. We've got Anne Hong, who says, I left Facebook over a year ago because I rarely ever used it. I didn't care to keep up with most of the people, but I am not much of a people person, but I do prefer to stay updated through other social media. We have other people who say, I only use it for work-related information, which is interesting. I much prefer Twitter. We've got others who say, I left. It's a spam fest of political garbage and non-stop marketing. This is Ogo Pogo Sighting. That is his Twitter handle. It could be a woman. It's mixed with data scrapping, monetization of users who get very little value of what they actually do give up. I mean, I must admit, I use Facebook, just like you, to just keep in touch with people, but that's the only reason.
And I also recognise it's free. I don't pay for this, and it has to be fueled some way. funded
Indeed.
some way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's move on now. This is The Independent, which has an interview with Vince Cable, who's the leader of the Liberal Democrats, former business secretary, talking about his campaign is gaining momentum for what he calls a final say on Brexit. People talk about a second referendum. What would a second referendum look like if we were to have one?
Well, it's interesting. The Independent newspaper that this campaign, the Final Say campaign, has been pushing, is very pro-EU. Vince Cable and his party have been very pro the EU. The Independent has quite a small circulation. The Liberal Democrats were routed at the last election. I just don't know how much appetite there is in the UK for another referendum.
But what would the referendum be about? That's the question.
Would it be about the final say on the decision of the government? But what this is saying is that it's a possibility of reversing that decision. And I think it's a very difficult, very dangerous precedent to start setting the moment you don't like the result of a democratic election, that you then have another one.
So that's Vince Cable on the front page of The Independent, but also many newspapers have got Theresa May as she's on her summer holiday with her husband, and we've just been saying she's going to have a sort of a working meeting with Emmanuel Macron in the south of France. It's very important for her, isn't it, during this summer recess period where she's not having to deal with the politics at home to try and build bridges in Europe?
Sally, no investors take long recesses. They continue working through. Investors are sick to death of British politicians not interacting around the world. It's time that Theresa May and every single member of the British government got out there and put the case out for Britain on the global stage. And my God, I hope she's doing that.
Well, she's definitely telling us she's doing that. We'll see whether it bears fruit. Let's move on to Time magazine. Federal judge halts the release of 3D printed gun blueprints. I would imagine many people hearing the news about that federal judge's decision was just breathing a sigh of relief.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because, of course, there are so many positive applications for 3D printing. We've heard about surgeons being able to send blueprints for prosthetic limbs around the world to developing countries. So many positive things. And this is one of the darker sides of this AR-15 gun that can be replicated through a printer. Plastic undetectable through metal detectors.
Absolutely.
This is quite alarming. And Donald Trump simply, in a particularly anodyne tweet for him, simply said it doesn't seem to make much sense to him. A court has sort of held that up now. One has to hope they see some sense here.
Now, The Sun is talking about why you mustn't struggle to work when you are ill. It's got a picture of a very healthy young man fishing in this particular story. This was off the back of news that came through this week that apparently in the UK we're less likely to take sick days than most other countries.
I think there is that kind of Northern European stereotype of ploughing on through illness. We all know, and certainly as people, if I have an office full of people, I don't actually really want people who are sick coming in. I don't really want to get on the tube with sick people because I'm then going to contract what they're carrying. And I think there is probably a little bit of a dangerous attitude here to ploughing on.
Presenteeism.
Presenteeism, really dangerous. I want people to be sitting at a desk and really productive. If they're not well, they're not productive. Furthermore, it could make them sicker, and that will put further weight on the health service.
Now, The Telegraph has got Madonna reinventing herself again at 60. She has done it several times. She's on the front page of Vogue, a huge article about her in Vogue magazine. Other newspapers have her as well. You're a fan. I am a fan. Some of the papers, it has to be said, are less positive than the Telegraph. They are a little bit scathing. The Daily Mail is quite scathing about her. This is somebody who's, probably the best-selling female recording artist in the world. She's got 13 studio albums, really catchy tunes. You go around the world, you can go to any bar around the world and, Like a Virgin is playing, La Isla Bonita. We all know these things. She's 60. She's reinvented herself. She says she's focusing on her family, although she's talking about new music as well. Inspired by her new home of Portugal, this fado folk music. Her new home of Lisbon, in fact. Absolutely, very trendy, where all the hipsters want to go. She's always ahead of the game, it seems, and in her 60th year, reinventing yet further. I know. So you think this will be a storming success? Possibly the new album, a #1 album? Well, I'd be lying to say I wouldn't hope so. All right, so Madonna reinventing herself, and it's quite interesting actually because there's this photograph of here on the Telegraph of her sort of running through a garden with some of her children. She's adopted several children from parts of Africa, which we know, of course.
And you can be very cynical about celebrity philanthropy, but what she's done in Malawi with her charity over the last years is amazing. There was no paediatric hospital there. There's a huge level of orphans from the HIV/AIDS crisis in Africa. She does seem, you know, objectively, she's in it for the long haul, and she's really making a difference. So, yeah, a slightly flip story at the end, a bit of a silly season August story, but actually a really nice touch as well.
Indeed. So she's on the front page of Vogue for those who are fans of Madonna. Ollie, thank you very much indeed for coming in for the news briefing. As I